All right, welcome to Unit 3, the circulatory system. Again, these presentations will be broken up into two different PowerPoints. The first one will be on the circulatory system, so what it's made up of, what the blood vessels are, what the blood's made up of, the system, and how it works. And then the second PowerPoint will be more on the heart itself and the actual path that blood takes through the heart. So to start, I just want to tie it back to last week's class when we talked about the digestive system. We talked about how by the end of the small intestine, all the nutrients that we're going to get out of our food have already been absorbed. So the food travels through the digestive system, and once it reaches the end of the small intestine, all those nutrients that were taken out of our food get absorbed through the walls of the small intestine and right into the bloodstream. If you remember, we talked about the microvilli. So I just want to show you this video. I'm not even going to play the sound. I'm just going to talk you through it. It's quick and boring and short, but I think it gives you a good visual of sort of what's happening here. If I can get to it. Give me a second. What happens here? Here we go. So, food enters, food moves down into the stomach, through the small intestine, and as it travels through the small intestine, these nutrients are being pulled out of it. So this is zooming in quickly onto the small intestine. It shows you, if you zoom into the wall of it, you see all these microvilli. And these food molecules get absorbed through the wall of the microvilli and straight into the blood vessels. And then from here, the blood vessels will carry those nutrients out and then through the rest of the body. So now we're into the circulatory system. So those nutrients got absorbed, they're in the circulatory system. So what exactly is the circulatory system? There are different types of circulatory systems. The two most common ones are closed circulatory systems, which is represented by this picture right here. This is the type of circulatory system we have. All the blood that travels through our body is contained within blood vessels. So whether they're veins or arteries or capillaries, which we'll talk about in a couple slides, the blood doesn't just flow freely through our tissues. It's all contained in these vessels. Closed circulatory systems are found in larger animals like vertebrae, humans, etc. And then there's open circulatory systems in smaller animals like insects, where the blood pumps from the heart and then it just sort of pumps into the tissue generally. It's not contained within blood vessels, just sort of flows through the body and then is re-delivered back to the heart, or reabsorbed back into the heart. So our circulatory system, the circulatory system in humans is closed, meaning the blood flows from the heart to the blood vessels in the lungs, back to the heart, to the blood vessels through the body, back to the heart, to the blood vessels through the lungs, back to the heart, blood vessels in the body. And our system has three parts. We have the heart itself that you see right here in the center of the chest. The blood, obviously, which is inside the heart and inside the arteries and veins. And then the vessels, which are the veins, the arteries, and the capillaries. So a little bit about the blood vessels. You've probably heard of arteries, you've probably heard of veins, maybe you've also heard of capillaries, but you might not know what the difference is. An easy way to remember, arteries that start with an A carry blood away from the heart. So the heart pumps the blood that comes out of the heart to its destination, travels through an artery. And then at some point, those arteries get really, really, really skinny and really small, and they turn into arterioles, and then those arterioles turn into capillaries, which you see right here. And capillaries are the tiniest blood vessels. They're really, really narrow, and they can only really carry one single blood cell. And these are the things that flow through all of our tissues and deliver oxygen and nutrients to every single cell in our body. And then they're sort of the connector. You can see here, you've got an artery, so you've got the heart here. You've got an artery that carries blood away from the heart, arteriole, to the capillaries. The capillaries are where this gas exchange happens. So the oxygen-rich blood from the heart goes into the cells, and the oxygen-poor blood comes out of the cells and delivers that oxygen-poor blood through the vein back to the heart. So the veins deliver blood back toward the heart, where they will then get pumped to the lungs through the arteries, and then back to the heart, and then to the body through the arteries, and then back to the heart through the veins, and then to the lungs, and then back to the heart through the veins. And those are the two systems that we'll talk about in a minute. So again, the capillaries are the smallest ones. They're sort of the intersection between veins, arteries and veins, and they are what deliver all of our cells with the nutrients they need. That's where the gas exchange happens as well. All right, so you've probably all had your blood pressure taken at some point. You've gotten some number, something over something else, like 120 over 80 maybe. But what do those numbers actually mean? When we take your blood pressure, you're measuring the actual pressure that's being placed on the arteries and the veins and the heart when the blood flows through it. So a blood pressure cuff goes on the arm, and the cuff is slowly let off, and then once blood's able to actually push through the artery, that gives us the number. So it's the pushing ability of the ventricles in the heart. And then the heart relaxes and the blood sort of pushes through some more. That's the lower number. So the top number is called the systolic pressure, and that's the pressure when the ventricles in the heart are contracted. So it's a higher pressure. The ventricles are contracting, they're pumping blood out of the heart, the blood pressure is higher. So that's where you would get the 120, ideally, something around there. And then the bottom number is the diastolic pressure. So that's the pressure when the ventricles are relaxed and blood's flowing back into the heart. So there's not as much pressure on the veins. So that's the lower number, typically around 70 or 80. Normal blood pressure, I'm going to move this over here. Normal blood pressure, the systolic number, the top number should be less than 120, and the diastolic number should be less than 80. If it's slightly elevated, it might be 120 to 129. It might be still less than 80. High blood pressure, another term for high blood pressure is hypertension. So hypertension causes your heart to work harder. You can imagine, for instance, if you had a hose that was spraying out water and you squeezed the hose so that, or maybe you put your thumb over the top of the hose, the water is going to have to work harder to get out, and it's going to come out faster because of that extra pressure you're applying. So high blood pressure can be dangerous for your heart. It can be damaging to your heart. And there are lots of things that cause hypertension. Stress causes hypertension. Eating a lot of cholesterol causes hypertension. Age, increasing age can cause hypertension. And arteriosclerosis causes hypertension as well. This is a condition where the walls of your arteries become clogged with plaque. So if you eat a lot of cholesterol, a lot of fatty foods, unhealthy foods, and you don't exercise, this plaque can build up in the arteries. And that's like I was saying, if you were to put your thumb over part of a hose, how the water would have to work harder to come out. It would come out more forceful. You'd have more pressure build up. So arteriosclerosis can cause high blood pressure. Health implications, it could cause strokes. It could cause heart attacks, poor circulation, shortness of breath. So it's important to exercise, to eat healthy. Sometimes it's genetic, so there might be medications that need to be taken. And then I just want to show you this picture real quick. These are actually capillaries. So you can see how many capillaries travel through the body. This is somebody who donated their body to science. The heart's here. The bigger vessels are the veins and the arteries. And then these small vessels, those are the capillaries. This is showing you how cholesterol from food and cholesterol produced from the liver can start to clog up those arteries and cause this arteriosclerosis, which eventually causes high blood pressure. All right, next thing we're going to talk about is blood. Blood is obviously the fluid that flows through these blood vessels and through the heart. And usually you see blood as red. The reason you see this as like a yellowish straw color is because that's the plasma. And then these red things are the red blood cells, and these purple looking things are the white blood cells. And these little blue things are called platelets. So we're going to talk about what each of these contributes to the blood. First of all, blood has a lot of functions. It transports oxygen to the cells and carries carbon dioxide away from the cells, transports the nutrients from our food to our cells. It carries hormones through our body so that our cells can function properly. It carries waste away from our cells and excretes it in urine and sweat and carbon dioxide. It maintains internal temperature, so when you get cold, your blood vessels can constrict and it'll keep the warm blood inside your body toward the vital organs, which is why your fingers get cold, your nose gets cold when you're cold. If you're hot and your face gets flush and red, it's often because your blood vessels are dilating, they're opening up so that the blood can travel to the surface of the skin and the heat can sort of radiate through the skin in an attempt to cool you down. The white blood cells that we'll talk about in a minute help the body heal, help fight infection. So let's get to that. So the plasma is the liquid part of blood. The purpose of plasma is mostly just to carry substances through the blood. It makes it liquid. It works as a really great transport system through the body for those sugars, salts, gases, nutrients, hormones, etc. Red blood cells are what make the blood appear red. They have this biconcave shape, and their main function is to transport oxygen. So they have these proteins called hemoglobin that attract oxygen molecules, carry those oxygen molecules from the lungs to the cells, deliver the oxygen, pick up carbon dioxide, carry them back to the lungs, and we exhale carbon dioxide. Our body recycles red blood cells pretty well, so they last in our body for about 120 days, and then eventually they're destroyed in the liver and the spleen, and new blood cells are made inside of our bones. So it's a continuous recycling. White blood cells are the ones that fight infection. So they're not as common as red blood cells. They can increase in number if you get an infection. Your body knows it gets an infection. It increases production of white blood cells. And these white blood cells are really the infection fighters. So they'll travel to an area that's infected and they'll start to sort of eat the bacteria or eat the virus, engulf it, get rid of it. And I apologize for this picture in advance. But if you ever get a cut that's infected, you know that there's pus that's usually there. That pus, it's not good because it indicates an infection, but what it is white blood cells. So white blood cells have rushed to the area and they've started sort of eating that bacteria. And then when the pus comes out, it's also clearing out the cut of bacteria to help the healing process. So while it's not good because it means there's an infection, it actually is helpful. The pus is helpful in clearing out the infection. All right, platelets. Platelets were those little blue things I showed you at the beginning of the blood slide. Platelets are little cell fragments, and their main job is blood clotting. So if you were to get a cut, the platelets would flow to the area, and they would start to sort of clump together. So it would get a little sticky near the cut because of the blood, and these platelets would clump there, and they start to release fibers. And those fibers that they release seal the wound, stop the bleeding, and then start the healing process. They release these chemicals that start blood clotting and covering the wound, a scab forms, and then the injury heals from the inside from there. All right, so that was my fastest one yet. Next slide will be, next PowerPoint will be on the heart. If you have any questions, send me a message. All right.